Monsieur Dali, but have you, from the beginning of your work, your great craftsmanship in painting, a message to give to the people that we perhaps don't understand?
No message.
No message.
No message.
Hello, fellow artist despisers. We can all agree that deciding on a best artist is virtually impossible. It's Bernini. But what if I told you there is one man, one unbelievably bad artist who stands below all, at the bottom of the barrel? How do we find this man? While we begin our journey on the internet with a quest to find.
That's why I'm sick of getting treated like a goddamn.
Without exception, these forums almost always mention abstract painters, in particular Pollock. Now this might be a good time to define bad art itself. A true bad piece of art is a work that fails to live up to its intent. Think, why don't we call Egyptian art bad? The forms make no sense, the perspective is fucked, and there is barely any composition. And yet, these are not bad paintings, for they were never created with the intent of being realistic. So bad art is something that tries to be X, but fails miserably. Now that you understand, can you honestly say Pollock made quote-unquote bad art? His paintings were made to look like this. They achieved their purpose. What we want is someone whose works do not. The second most common target is those lazy minimalists. Now, this may come as a surprise, but I am not some Roman bust profile picture having Twitter account owner with some mention to traditionalism in the name who keeps blabbering about how architecture these days is just so bad. I actually like modern art, even the more minimalist works. Think of Fontana's/canvases. This is not paint, the canvases were actually stabbed using a knife. Now, even if you find it aesthetically unpleasant, you must admit just how impressive it is to do something entirely new in the art world. For thousands of years, no one had thought of using the canvas itself as the material of their paintings. This spatialism, as it's called, is such a creative concept, as Fontana was one of the first to make art that was to be seen as more of a performance. By the way, I have $1 million idea for an exhibition. Okay, hear me out. We take a blank canvas, right? And we use the bottom half of the canvas and we fold it to make origami. And then we put the origami on the top part. Hey, Tate Modern, I'm free anytime you want to call. Same goes for MoMA. Just text me and, we can make this happen. This brings us to the third most hated man, whose name keeps showing up in these forums again and again. Rothko. Now, on abstract and minimalist works, or any piece of art really, what matters is not how the artwork looks, but instead how it makes me, or the viewer, feel. Let's do a thought experiment. You're in a museum. You look up to see a small watercolor. The curator next to you tells you that it was drawn after Rothko, as a young painter, got his first solo exhibition in Portland, Oregon. He drew the city in a joyous haste. How do you feel? You're in a museum. You look up to see an oil painting. Two figures dance at the edge of the sea, their feet touching the sand as abstract colors surround them. The curator next to you tells you that it was drawn a little after Rothko met his soon-to-be wife. How do you feel? You're in a museum. You look in front to see a block of color. The curator next to you tells you that it was drawn shortly after Rothko and his wife had their first child, a daughter. How do you feel? You're in a museum. You look a bit down to see this. The curator next to you tells you that a short while after it was done, Rothko took his own life. How do you feel? Rothko, at his core, is a painter of emotion, attempting to create an experience. Try to imagine what happiness might look like, or how you could put sadness on a canvas. The forms may not be there, but the colors we associate with these emotions are. I mean, using only color to evoke emotion and behavior is not some crazy new idea born from art. Prisons have used this shade of pink called Baker-Miller pink for years now because some studies show the color reduces aggressiveness in inmates. There are also multiple reports of the color having no effect or even causing people to be more violent than before. Polyblank is not responsible for any misleading information given. Japanese studies claim that using blue lights in train stations causes jumpers to reconsider and has reduced suicide rates. This too is actually kind of disputed. Polyblank is not responsible for any misleading information given. Brands and their logos use color psychology too. I mean, almost every food item is either red or orange just to increase your impulsiveness, to influence your every decision. As one man said,
"Color makes us hungry. Hunger makes us human. Everyone can see it. Everything's connected."
Now with all that out the way, what emotion would you feel from a smoky, almost black purple or a deep ocean blue? These are some of the 14 drawings exhibited in the Rothko chapelle. People who have experienced the chapelle describe it as an almost meditative experience. There are also the infamous accounts of someone breaking down crying in front of these gigantic paintings. How this happens so much that James Elkins in his book Pictures and Tears says,
"There is no survey to prove it, but it is likely that the majority of people who have wept over 20th century paintings have done so in front of Rothko's paintings. And of all Rothko's paintings, people have been moved most by the 14 huge canvases he made for the chapel that now bears his name."
This is absolute bullshit. I am sorry to ruin the magic here, but no, a Rothko will not make you cry. This genius marketing strategy of saying these paintings will move you to tears is just that, advertising. I think this guy summed it up perfectly. I have a weird sense of anti-sentimentality against Rothko because I feel like there was a posthumous push to add an almost kitschy emotional element to his work. At best, you will have a strong emotional reaction, but there is no real first-hand account of someone looking at a Rothko and randomly starting to sob. Don't get me wrong, this is only a critique of the people who over-exaggerate paintings to the point of trying to create something almost mythical. Thank God we've never done something similar, right?
May pagan's light shine upon you all.
Now some of you probably clicked on this video thinking, I know who the worst artist is. It's that Austrian painter named Adolf. That's right. Egon Leo Adolf Ludwig Schiele was an Austrian expressionist painter. His work is noted for its intensity. It is true that there are drawings done by extremely evil people. Everyone at some point in their lives gets a chance to dabble in art. This has always made me wonder though. Surely when he was 8 or something, Mao scribbled on a piece of paper. Maybe Napoleon made a little doodle on a book. Maybe Stalin in church school had to draw a little for decorations. Same goes for any major personality born after pen and paper were popularized. If we collected these works, can you imagine the gallery we could have? The art of all these people lined up. Yeah, not gonna happen. Anyways, there is no way to find the worst person ever who also happens to be a painter. I mean, there are countless lists of serial killers, each worse than the last, who did a ton of paintings while locked up. I'm planning on making a video on these people at some point, but until then, we should go back to our search for the true worst artist. Look, after asking my friends, I realized that when people tell me their idea of bad art and the sort of works they hate, it is without a doubt modern art. And no, I'm not talking about the movement, I'm talking about contemporary works. What gets critiqued most is not the beauty of the painting or the emotional response it gets, but instead, and this is very interesting, how much effort was put into it. To keep it short, modern works are seen as low effort and easy to produce. Now, if we were to gauge art based on effort, then the greatest painters ever would be the pointillists, and the greatest artists would most likely just be those performance artists who ruined their lives for art, like Doching Shea, who punched a clock and took a photo every hour for a whole year, meaning he never slept and he never left the studio for more than an hour. In an interview after the work was finished, Shea said the mental anguish was comparable to living in the Balkans for a day. I find the work intriguing, but to say it is the best because it took an immense amount of effort to create does not make any sense at all. Some of the works that touched me the most are straight up extremely lazy, like this by Damien Hirst. Can you imagine walking into a museum and straight up seeing an actual shark just standing there? It's not even taxidermy, it still has its organs. An absolutely deranged artwork. And the name, I haven't even mentioned the name. It's The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. Think about that for a second. Can you truly imagine death the moment in your mind? The title alone is enough to give someone an existential crisis. Let's be honest, This took very little work from Hirst's part. He just paid people to catch the shark and then paid people to assemble the piece. But it works. Now okay, we're about to get controversial here and you may think it's dumb, but I even like ready-made art like the candy piles of González Torres. It's nothing but a pile of candy in a corner. It doesn't get lazier than this. The fun part is that you're encouraged to walk up and take a piece of candy with you. The artwork slowly deteriorates and eats itself. González Torres eventually passed away from HIV. The piles are thought to be a metaphor for the slow deterioration of the gay community due to the AIDS crisis. A bunch of candy being slowly devoured, stuck in a corner. On these installation pieces or found object art, it's usually not about the object shown, but instead the story that they tell. Now, what sort of artist would have to be so bad, so inexplicably awful, for even me, the guy who praises candy in a corner, to hate them? Who is this disaster artist? I found him hidden away in an old art magazine. Meet the art of Luciano Fabro.
This is too exciting. Folks leave out the show feeling truly enlightened.
Remember my definition of bad art? Something that tries to be X but fails? Fabro is unique. His art doesn't try to be aesthetic but fails. It doesn't try to be effortful but fails. No, Fabro's art tries to be meaningful but fails miserably. Never in my life have I seen such soulless works. It's not that I feel bored or mad or curious. I feel nothing. There is no story to be found in a Fabro. The square is not some minimalist expression of two lovers eventually meeting or something. And this is not a case of hating something you can't understand, for understanding a Fabro is not difficult. Square is installed and eventually bends due to gravity. Same with wheel. The pole bends. The fluid lines, it's an analogy for Baroque art. Pole is very slightly bent. The cross hangs in the air and bends at the tips. It plays with space and quote-unquote disobeys order. Now that you know their attempt at meanings, one last time, tell me how you feel. I think you get it. In oversimplifying forms, Fabro has corroded all meaning and emotion that could be felt from his art. And don't even get me started on the articles written on him. He had an exhibition with the Simon Lee Gallery, so what did the gallery write to hype him up? The spare design and facture of his first works encapsulate with economic means the experimental poetry that would come to define the conceptual innovation of his near 5-decade-long career. This assiduous reflection on the language of form and space is documented in Fabro's extensive textual output, which shines a light on the theoretical and artistic philosophies that guided his practice from beginning to end. Outside of saying he did art pauvre, this is a nothing burger of text. Unbelievable. In architecture, we call this tolkatecture, where you try to add meaning to works that lack it by means of using very grand words and saying extremely vague things that can't clearly be understood. Basically, talk like a politician. Obama! Can you actually imagine his works from that article passage I just read? Of course not. It's like describing a window on a building by saying, ah yes, the symbiotic relationship of the space with his innate other, the negative space. This glass installation invokes Genesis itself, as creation must come from the art of taking, just like how his craters make the moon beautiful. Damn, I'm good at this. After consulting an art professor I know, they told me that these pieces are not made to be appreciated, but instead to be thought over. However, I would argue that these traits are not mutually exclusive. We even have an artist who did exactly what I'm talking about, Duchamp, who also has a piece called Wheel. I know that for most of you watching this, you might find both very repulsive, but even someone who despises this type of art can agree that Duchamp is miles ahead of Fabro. I was originally going to end the video here, but I just thought of something. By provoking me into writing a 15-minute essay about him, by making me do hours of research into his art, and by making me think about his pieces, has Fabro won? Has he made me find my own meaning in his works and gotten me lost in them? Fuck no, this guy sucks. That's all folks. Shout out to the guy who predicted this entire video. And if you are still watching, then why not subscribe? You lose nothing. I appreciate you for your incredible support. Thanks for tuning into Polyblank, and I'll see you later.